What if the problem is not the product? What if the problem is how we talk about the product?
What's up, champions? Welcome to another episode of Champion Reads, the podcast where we talk about best-selling books by best-selling authors and the lessons that we learn from it. My name is William Blake. We're also joined today by our other executive producer, Mr. Ian Sturmer. And we're going to continue in our book that we've been reading this month of Building a Story Brand by Donald Miller. It's been a great book so far, and I'm excited for the conversation today because we're going to talk about those one-liners that we need in business, how not to confuse our customer, and that maybe it's just not the product that's wrong. Maybe it's just the way that we sell the product that's wrong. So it's going to be a good conversation. Ian, when I first heard that quote, it instantly, because in the back room we were talking about the topic of one-liners today, instantly that resonated. Because for me, when I started my business, I was fine-tuning everything, making sure everything was perfect. No one was a customer yet or a client. Everything was perfect. Everything was good. And then I didn't like sales. And so I didn't do sales. I wouldn't send a message out. I didn't do any phone calls. And it wasn't until, I think, 3 months into it, I got the book, $100 million Offers by Alex Hormozi, who then humbled me and kicked me in the butt and be like, dude, it's easy. Just reach out to 100 people a day. And me, myself, I'm like, 100 people a day. That is a lot of people. But if you're just starting out a business, you got to do it. So I started it, and within 3 days, I had my first client. I'm like,
Nice.
yeah, it's the product's there. It's just how we talk about the product that seems to be the issue.
Yeah, I think that's so true. One of my hobbies, I pick up Entrepreneur Magazine and I look through and see what are the new businesses coming out? What are businesses they're encouraging you to start? And I look at these and I see these great ideas. So one company, as an example, they have this, it's a lawn company, and they have this fertilizer that has a green dye in it. So as you fertilize the lawn, it dyes the grass green. So it makes it look great. I thought, wow, that is a wonderful product. But you know what? This whole business is about selling it. Doesn't matter how good the product is. The fact is, I've got to go out knocking door to door or advertising somewhere. If no one knows I have this great product, who cares how great the product is? So it's all about getting that product known. And that comes down to story. You know, a quote that's come up in my life several times recently: facts tell, stories sell. So if we can find a story that explains our product, and I love yours, and I'm going to ask you to do something here and put you on the spot.
Sure.
You have a great business, dyslexic achievement coach. So you're helping people. Well, I'm not going to give it away. The name gives part of it, but can you take and do like a 30-second story of your business, of how you came to do this? And I know you've told me this before, so I'm not putting you too much on the spot, I hope. But give us that story.
Yeah, it started back when I was in first grade, diagnosed, and through elementary to high school and to college, I was lonely. I got depressed. People were just avoiding me because I was a special kid. And even when I had friends, they pushed me to the side because they were in honors classes and I wasn't. And it wasn't until I decided that it was enough to then start working towards a goal. And I simply started with reading 12 books in a year, which then turned to 40, to 50, and now 60. And then the question always came up, what if I could do more? And from there, continued to build and then built this business to help dyslexic adults to be able to build their confidence and achieve the goals that they want.
Yeah. So you achieved success in your life. You overcame an obstacle. Now you want to be the Obi-Wan or the Yoda to come in. Yeah. And
I am the Yoda.
help other people to overcome their obstacle and find happiness in their life. That's the story. That's the hero's journey. You have an obstacle, you find a way to overcome it. You find an inspiration, a guide, a mentor to push you through it. You overcome it, and you get the girl in the end.
Yeah, I got my wife. Woo!
Yeah.
I get what you're saying.
And she's
You're
wonderful.
absolutely,
we'll take that.
She is wonderful. We both have very wonderful wives. It's interesting how you say it, because a thought came up to my mind where whenever we share stories, the best of stories have a hero, a villain, and a guide, as well as a challenge that the hero went through and overcame. Like those four usually create a pretty good story. And since you said Obi-Wan, we're going to jump into Star Wars. So you got Luke.
One of my favorites.
Yeah, one of my favorites as well. You got Luke, who is the hero. You have the villain, who thought was Darth Vader, but then turned into the Emperor. Spoiler alert for those who haven't watched it.
What? No. Sorry.
What? Decades of the movie being out?
Yeah.
You have the challenge that he went through, which is the whole story of the three movies that I went into. And then you had the guide, who was Yoda. At the time, there was not many Jedi. I think there's only a handful. And Yoda was one of them, to then teach Luke how to use the Force, use a lightsaber, and go from there. And Obi-Wan. I can't forget Obi-Wan. Obi-Wan helped as well. But there are those guides that help us. And when building a story, we got to think to ourselves when explaining it to other people, who's the hero, who's the villain, who's the guide, and what's the challenge that the hero is going to overcome. And when it comes to our business, we got to put our customer as that hero, the villain as that big, hairy, audacious goal that they're trying to achieve. The guide should be us. If we're doing our business right, the guide should be us. And then that challenge is the actions, daily, weekly, monthly actions that they take to then get to the result that they want.
And I think that, our job as the guide is to put our product, or our customer, the hero. I had this great thing lined up until I started saying it out loud.
I do it every time. We're good.
Yeah. So we want to help our client overcome that challenge. And I guess as you were saying that, I was thinking about your situation, because I love your story with that, in overcoming dyslexia. And the books you read actually became the hero, or became the way to overcome the challenge. The way through it was the very thing that you thought was the challenge at the beginning. The books were a challenge to read, but they became the thing that got you through it. They became the thing that strengthened you and turned you into the real hero. So I guess building that storyline to help our customers. A lot of times we have to help our customers know what the problem really is.
Yeah.
They don't realize what the issue is. They just sometimes live with it and assume that's all there is. But when they see a path forward, and they can turn themselves into that hero through our careful guidance of that.
A confused customer is not a long-term customer, because you might be able to BS your way through it in the beginning. But if you don't know what it is, don't have a mission statement, don't have something to help it be clear to your customer or client, they're not sticking around. It reminds me, you've been to a B&I group, I assume. You've probably been to several. My first time I went to a B&I group, drove up. It was a 20-minute drive to Lehigh. Went to it 9 a.m. I think it was one of like the biggest BNI groups in Utah or maybe the nation. I don't know. It's a pretty big group. They do the introductions of the guests who come there, and they have like an outline that you can go off of. So beforehand, I was practicing, I was getting this down. Then they showed me that outline, and I'm like, I forgot to put my business in here. I forgot, like, the whole thing I was practicing was just shot down when I saw that. Thing was, what I had planned was great and fantastic, but because I saw something and put it of higher value, I went to it. So the first time I gave my elevator pitch or my 30 seconds, it was so bad. Like, hey, I'm William Blake with WB Coaching, help dyslexics to, and like it went on, started telling the quick portion of the story I was, but then 30 seconds hit and they had like a timer or something that went off, and I'm like, yeah, and that's me, and I got invited by this guy named Steve, and it was like, it was just so bad. It was so bad. I'm sure no one else remembers it, but I do. It was just so bad. And I know that in that moment, on this topic of one-liners, making sure it's clear, there was no clarity in what I was saying.
Yeah.
Now, I've gotten a lot better after that, and I'm glad I had that experience. But that was another challenge that I had to go through of, you got to be clear and you got to have it down, because when you have it down, your customer knows what's up, and if they relate to it, they'll become a long-term customer.
Yeah. You said something really important in the middle of that. I'm sure nobody remembers it, but I do. And that's like the worst outcome. Nobody there remembers you. So what good is the whole point of being there in marketing if you're not memorable? But you remember doing something bad or doing a bad job at something. So your confidence is down from it. And if the customer doesn't remember you and you're feeling less confident, the business is not going to move forward. So if we can turn it into a simple story, and you didn't use the word I was hoping you would this time. I was kind of leading you towards it. You help people discover their dyslexic superpower.
Oh, yes.
And I love that it's just a simple way that you say it, because superpower conjures a whole bunch of images in my mind. And I'm picturing Superman flying over buildings and fighting off evil and rescuing damsels in distress. But then it makes me think, so dyslexic superpower, overcoming that challenge, turning a weakness into a strength. That's the hero's journey. Is the hero encountering an obstacle, finding a mentor or a guide to help them through it, and overcoming it and becoming stronger in the end. So in that one little phrase, you described the whole hero's journey, that whole storyline. And when we can use some of those words that automatically invoke images in our mind, they remind us of stories that we already know. That lets the audience, our customer, know the whole set of emotions wrapped up in that by using some of those key words like superpower. So kudos on that one to you.
Well, thank you. Yeah, you and thank you for helping remind me of that, because I've started to lean more towards what I do, and the phrase that you just mentioned is more of like why I do it, because it involves such power in it. I help dyslexics to make their dyslexia a superpower, or there's some version of that I remember having. But that's exactly it. It's changing something that most everyone think of as bad into a superpower, which is like not average, which is not good, but it's the best, right? It's something that stands out. It's a superpower. So thank you for helping me remember that. You are absolutely right. When we share, when we are able to come up with something to share with others that is so profound, they will ask, tell me more. And I think if you get that question of tell me more, you've nailed that one-liner.
Yep. And that's the key. Now, in today's world, our attention spans are so short, so small, that we have to be able to pack as much into as few words as possible. One of mine, when I was doing life insurance, I mentioned this earlier with you, but people say, oh, what do you do if I'm in a networking group? Instead of saying I do life insurance, which has a whole set of connotations that nobody cares about, I would say, oh, I pay people to die. And then they start thinking, what does that mean? There's images flashing in their mind of assassins and all of those things.
Ian is a secret ninja.
Yeah. I put the idea of money and death together in that. And then they think for a second, oh, well, life insurance. But then they might have a few questions about it. So if you can create a story in someone's mind, and building is, people love stories. I was thinking earlier that, probably the two worst things to read are the phone book. There's a great list of characters in there, but there's no plot. Or an instruction manual, which tells you everything you need to know, but there's no story to it. There's no character, there's no story, there's no journey. So instead we turn and we read novels, or we read even the personal development ones that we talk about so much in here. Those are packed full of stories and examples, because until they give us a story that we can relate to in our mind, nothing sounds real. Nothing makes sense until they share the success story. They share the hero's journey in the book. And then we say, oh, yes, those 7 habits really do help people be more effective, or whichever book it happens to be.
That makes me think of the principle of reciprocity, I think is how you pronounce it.
Yeah.
Dyslexia for the win, right? Reciprocity. The ability to, in congruence with social media, to share and give, and then eventually it coming back to you. So a lot of people get scared in sharing what you mentioned, sharing their story, sharing the stuff that they have, the value that they give, because they think that if they share it, they won't have anything else to give. But what Donald Miller in this book shared was that he shared plenty, and every single time it has never hurt him. Actually, it helped him, because people know exactly what you do, exactly what you give, and they come to you more for like a personalized type agenda than anything. So with what you were saying, if there's not a story, it's boring and people don't want to go with it. You get that whole instruction manual. Us as Champion Circle, we might share everything that we have, but people won't read it. But if we share videos of like the tidbits of what we offer, and not just the whole thing, which we do offer the whole thing, but like those tidbits, then they seem to be more interested in the tidbits, and they're just like, wow, I wonder what else there is. And I'm like, come, we can share, we can build your story, we can help you out, we can help you be a high achiever. But it's just interesting that as people, for some reason, psychologically, I'm this way as well, that we love the tidbits, but even when everything is presented in front of you, it's boring. It's not in that story format.
Yeah. The stories are what connect us. Probably the greatest salesman in history would be Jesus, who taught so many things. But unless you're talking to a real biblical scholar, if you ask anyone to share something that Jesus said beyond love your neighbor, they're going to tell you one of the parables, one of the stories. The Sermon on the Mount is great with the Beatitudes, and all of the meat of what he taught is in there. But we're going to say, oh, he taught the lost sheep, or say something he taught. They're going to tell one of the stories, one of the parables. because that's what connects to us. And those stories can then encompass everything else that's going on. But it makes it real. It turns it from an idea to a reality in our life. And I think that's the key. What we're trying to do in sales and marketing for ourselves, we need to turn whatever we do, this concept we have, this wonderful idea inside our head, into something tangible for the customer, something that they can see relates to them. And that phrase that I love seeing online, oh, I found a product that I never knew I needed. But now they see how it fits in their life. They see how it changes their life. They see the story of that. And if we can't do the story, we're just not going to grow our business. We're not going to sell. We're not going to be effective marketers.
Yeah, it's crazy. A month ago, before we got into this book, I didn't realize how effective storytelling can be, and how it's really the only way that you can go about marketing and selling. Because if you do selling without a story, then you're a typical salesman, and nobody likes that. If you're a marketer without a story, you're out of a job, because that's really what marketers do, is create that story and that brand. I don't know. It's so impactful of how stories affect brands in that way.
Yeah. And stories don't have to be the whole huge hero's journey, I think. Stories can be broken down into the simplest aspect. I was just thinking of car commercials. Car commercials generally don't show pictures of the engine to show how efficient the pistons are. They don't show how high quality spark plugs they put in the engine. They might talk about gas mileage, but almost every car commercial is this car driving through a beautiful area, whether it's a nice downtown city. Usually it's that curve in the mountains with a slope on one side. They do that every time. Why do they do that? Not because they want us to drive there, but every one of us wants to drive and enjoy it. We don't want driving to be a challenge and a task that it normally is in our life. It's a way to get from point A to point B. But they tell us a short story of us enjoying life with no care, going through the mountains, just being happy. That short little story is what sells the car.
Yeah.
And the paint job.
Right.
Yeah.
That brings up two thoughts: Maverick and then the Super Bowl. So Maverick, the gas station. I cannot tell you any motto, mantra, or any of that from any other gas station. But Maverick, it's 3 words: adventure's first stop.
Yeah.
That tells the story. When you're going on an adventure, this is the first place you go. Then to the Super Bowl, all the commercials during the Super Bowl are story oriented. I'm thinking of the Doritos commercial specifically. I remember one year, it's been a little bit, but this dude was standing by the door and he was eating his Doritos. And there was a dog in the backyard and he was kind of teasing the dog. And this dog is just like slowly running up to the door. The wife's sitting on the couch and says, "Honey, don't tease the dog." He's like, "Come here, boy. I got a Dorito." And there's the back door glass door that's blocking it. So you see the dog running and everything. Then the last second, the dog jumps, busts down the back door, falls on the dude. And then the dog crawls over and starts eating the Doritos. And I remember that it was the story that was so funny that made me, years later, it's had to have been at least 6 or 7 years since I've seen this. Years later, I still remember that commercial. And I know that it was a Doritos commercial. So now anytime I see a dog busting through a back door, crazy how psychology works, I think of Doritos. And then my mind goes to, Doritos sound nice. When am I going to the grocery store next? right? And it starts building that path of me buying my bag of Doritos.
I think there's a story just in the word Doritos. I have never heard the word Doritos and not wanted to eat one from there. But I want to jump back with that idea for a second on the Maverick gas station. Have you ever in your life thought, I need to go to the gas station? That's an adventure.
No, never.
Those words don't go together, but they have tied in adventure into this gas station. And for those of you who don't live in places where there's a Maverick, when you go in, there's pictures of mountain climbing and rocks and trails and all these things throughout the store to make you think, if you're at Maverick filling up gas and buying Doritos, you must be going out into the mountains on some wild Sasquatch hunting adventure or something. And they've made that boring, annoying having to fill gas and said, hey, this is the beginning of the exciting part of your life. And they've tied in all of that adventure story. You can't say the word adventure without conjuring up images in your mind of Indiana Jones or something like that. So sometimes that story brand marketing, there's a few key words that you can use that instantly create a story in your mind. And when you can tie those into your branding, that's, I was going to say half of the job, but you're probably at 90% of the job of building a story brand by finding those key words that automatically create stories in your mind, or in our customer's mind more specifically.
Yeah. Like with your life insurance, you had the words death and money in there. Yep. With me, I had the words dyslexia and superpower. And it's crazy that just a few words can change everything. Maverick, adventure's first stop. Not super duper out there, unique and everything, but because of the story that it can and does tell, it makes it powerful. So I think when we are trying to figure out our own key phrases for our business or solopreneurship or whatever we're working towards, we got to find those one-liners. And those one-liners shouldn't be 2 or 3 sentences that have a comma, that have the word and or but afterwards, because we all know those are boring. It's the right. One sentence that keeps it compact. Adventure's first stop. Helping dyslexics make their superpower. I don't know why I stumbled. Helping people with dyslexia turn it into superpower. That seems too long. I'll figure it out later.
Helping people find their dyslexic superpower.
Thank you.
I think that's what you used to say. Yeah.
That is what I used to say. Helping people find their dyslexic superpower. Thank you.
Anytime. That's why I'm here.
This is why we need. Side note, this is why we need community. This is why we need support. This is why it's great to have a team, because we all help out each other.
Yeah.
Jumping back to the story brand, it's those key phrases that really just make the difference. And especially when you're going out to BNI or networking groups or wherever you're going, what's the powerful first phrase you're going to say? Public speakers always have a powerful question or a powerful quote or something at the beginning to engage their audience at the beginning, because they know that if they don't, they'll lose them right away.
Yep, definitely. You get it drawn out. If people can't relate to what you're saying at the very beginning, whether it builds curiosity, whether it builds an attraction to it, whether it builds a commonality between you and the speaker, we just have too short of attention spans. That's why we started doing that little quote at the beginning of this one. Let's try and hook somebody in with the sentence. I know I'm giving away our marketing secrets here.
Oh no!
Yeah, and nobody else has ever thought of that, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But how do we build that commonality? How do we make somebody see the importance of it? And again, those stories. As I was thinking, we geeked out about Star Wars earlier, and I'm going to do a quick geek out about Star Trek because they're both wonderful. There's one episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation where Captain Picard is sent down, or he's stranded on this planet with an alien from a race that he's never encountered before. And I apologize not being able to remember the name of that race, but their entire vocabulary was only the names of stories. So they would say the title of a story, and that conveyed the whole concept of what they were saying. And that was their entire language was only the name of the stories that all of them knew and were passed down. There were no other, it wasn't hand me a cup. It was, I can't even begin to think of an example there. John and Julie on the boat. And that meant hand me a cup. So it brought in the idea of the stories that bind all of us together and bring us together. And I know we're getting close to our top of the hour, so I'm going to finish with one more little idea, then I'll let you wrap it up. If I tell you, don't go into strangers' houses, that tells you a certain amount, and you may listen to me and you may trust me not to do it or whatever. But if I tell you about this little girl who found an empty house and went in there, and there were 3 bowls of porridge on the table, and one was too hot and one was too cold and one was just right. So she ate all of that. And then she sat in the chairs and found one. Then she went to sleep in the 3 beds. And if you read the original story, the bears eat her in the end. We've sanitized it some in the way we tell it nowadays, but the original Grimm's fairy tales had her killed and eaten by the bears in the end of it, because that story resonated with children. They could see that happening, and it made it real and personal to them. And that was the purpose of most of these old Grimm's fairy tales and fables and things, were to teach people an important lesson, especially to teach children the lessons they would need to know in life to survive and be happier and be good people. And they did that through telling stories or fables, and or we call them parables, stories that teach us a lesson, because those stick with us. And if we went through our own life, we don't have time for that, but probably the most important lessons we've learned in life, we would tell somebody the story of how we learned them. Not just, don't drink and drive. If you drink and drive, this happened to my friend. This is how it started. We tell the story of all these things. So stories connect. They connect us to our listener, who is our customer. They make things become real instead of just a list of names and facts like the phone book and the instruction manual. So build stories, and those keywords can make those stories come to life, because we all have stories built into our mind. We just need to connect those stories that the customers already have. So I'll let you finish up with your thoughts.
Well said. Well said. When it comes to building a story brand and a story business, really it's the only way that you can do it to get to where you want to go. And the challenge that we'd leave for everyone who is listening, because we love challenges, we love call to actions, because if you don't do anything after you learn something, did you really learn anything? The challenge is, what is your one-liner for yourself? This can relate to the business that you're working on. This can relate to you as an employee, trying to be the best, the number one employee. But what is your one-liner for what you're doing? And then the challenge after that is to go and start sharing that with people. Because like my story with the B&I group, absolutely destroyed myself in that 30-second pitch. But 1, no one else remembered it. 2, I was able to then refine from that mistake that I made. And that's what life is about. It's about making mistakes. It's about making failures. But step by step, as we do that, we get a little better and better. And now from that B&I instance a year ago, now I'm a lot better. Ian, when you first started out, I'm sure you struggled with coming up with your one-liner. And you probably didn't, and like myself, you probably came up with the one-liner after making a bunch of mistakes.
Yeah. You actually just scared me with that, because every time you said you need to come up with your one-liner, you paused for a second, and I thought, I don't have my personal one-liner yet. I need to do that. So that's the goal I have set up.
Nice. Yeah, but that one-liner for you and for what you're working towards, come up with it and start sharing it, because as you do so, you'll be able to refine it and you'll be able to begin to tell the story that made you who you are today, and that will be able to impact and help other people through it. So I'll leave that challenge with you guys. This has been a great book so far, Building a Story Brand by Donald Miller. If you guys have found inspiration in this episode, go ahead and subscribe to our podcast, Champion Reads. You can find us on all the major podcasting platforms. You can also follow us on social media, the best place to find it. Go to our website at www.mychampioncircle.com. There you'll have all the links to our social media, as well as to the events and things that are going on in our community. And until next time, champions, continue to be great, continue to build your own story brand, and create your one-liner. And always remember that it's through mistakes and through the stories that we have that create the best endings. So go ahead and create yours. We'll see you next time, champions.